I'm Spencer Bailey. This is Time Sensitive. Hey everyone, this week on the show, I sit down with Richard Christiansen. He's the founder of Flamingo Estate, which is both a place, this incredible home and garden on a 7-acre property in the hills of Los Angeles, and a brand, which operates a global farming collective and sells wellness, beauty, and home essentials products. What started out as a sort of COVID-time side project for Richard has quickly become a cult business. In just a few years, Flamingo Estate has collaborated with the likes of Julianne Moore, Martha Stewart, and Ai Weiwei, created some 200 or so products. Prior to his current venture, Richard's main focus was the agency Chandelier Creative, which he founded nearly 20 years ago in New York City and has done identity and brand storytelling projects for companies including Hermes, Nike, and Nordstrom. A renowned creative director, Richard also now considers himself, perhaps slightly cheekily, a vegetable salesman. He describes Flamingo Estate as a home for radical pleasure. If what he's doing is great branding, and it is, it's also part of a movement to give farmers a boost and foster slower, more sustainable, largely pesticide-free ways of food production. Being near Hollywood, his operation may be celebrity adjacent, but that's really just part of the mythic allure of it. Flamingo Estate has also swiftly scaled a business around notions of slowing down, prioritizing pleasure, and reconnecting with our senses. Richard's also got a new book out, The Guide to Becoming Alive, which includes interviews with Jane Goodall, John Legend, and Jane Fonda, and tells the story of Flamingo Estate's rapid rise. On the episode, we talk about everything from beekeeping and honey to how, in the second decade of running Chandelier Creative, he found himself feeling, quote, unalive and yearning for a greater sense of connection with people and the planet. To the impetus for starting Flamingo Estate, the vision for which came to him while reading Jane Goodall's book, Seeds of Hope, during a climbing trip up Mount Everest. Before we get into the episode, I'd first like to thank our Season 10 presenting sponsor, L'École School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and Arpels. With the mission of sharing the art and culture of jewelry with the general public, L'École's offerings range from courses on art history and introductory jewelry making and gemology to books and publications. From public lectures and talks to exhibitions such as Stage Jewels of the Comédie Française and Golden Treasures, 3,000 Years of Chinese Ornaments. L'École also has a new podcast called Voice of Jewels. Through a combination of narration and insights from art historians, jewelry experts, and L'École lecturers, each episode delves into the secrets and lore behind history's most mythic jewels. Season 4 explores famous jewels from comic books, including the Infinity Gauntlet, the superpowered bejeweled glove in the eponymous Marvel series, and One Piece, an elusive treasure at the heart of Eiichiro Oda's legendary manga series. Season 5, meanwhile, investigates the legends of pearls, including those worn by Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, and a Renaissance queen. You can find all 5 seasons on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about L'École and Voice of Jewels, head to www.l'ecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.LECOLEVANCLEEFARPELS.com. And now, here's my conversation with Richard. Hi, Richard. Welcome to Time Sensitive.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So, before we get into Flamingo Estate, this incredible compound in Los Angeles, I thought we would start with honey and beekeeping.
Okay. My favorite things.
You've been a beekeeper for a long time.
Yeah.
Grew up with beekeeper parents who
Yes.
have their own honey company in Australia.
Yeah.
You've noted that you and your identical twin brother spent many childhood holidays dressed up in bee costumes, waving people into your parents' booth at honey conventions.
Yeah.
That's pretty deep on the honey train. And honey is how you met the owner of the house that became Flamingo Estate.
You did read it.
And through the Flamingo Estate brand, you've gotten to make honey with the likes of Will Ferrell, LeBron James,
Ai Weiwei.
Ed Ruscha,
Yeah.
Julianne Moore. So it seems like in your life, all roads lead back to bees and honey.
Maybe that's true. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. No, my mom and dad are, I hope you never meet them. I say this to people. I hope you never sit next to them at a wedding or on a plane, because all my dad wants to talk about is honey. It's all he ever wants to talk about. And so, they're just for many years in rural Australia, just making lots and lots and lots of honey and geeking out over honey. My dad gets very competitive and really, really competitive with my honey. And but he's, it's such a funny world. Like, he introduced me to this group of kind of like rugby players, I guess, who were in New Zealand. These guys, just these bros, who were making honey on the very edge of a volcano in New Zealand, in Mount Taranaki. The plant that you need to make Manuka honey was growing at such an incredible rate on the very, very top of the crater of this volcano, but it was inaccessible from car or even by foot, and so they would drop their hives in by helicopter, these huge winches. They drop them on the edge of the volcano, and then they'd pull them up a few months later, and also by helicopter. And that's the Manuka that we sell. It's in some of our products, it's like double the potency of any Manuka honey you'll find anywhere. It's amazing. It's like medicine, and you cannot get it anywhere but this tiny speck of green on the edge of this volcano. And so I've just met these really wild people through the honey. Yeah, it's been amazing. And then, as you said, it was sort of how we started. And I used to have bees here when I lived in New York, up on Long Island. And so that it's sort of always been in my family, yeah.
What have you learned about your time with bees?
Well, it's a bit of a cliche, but I have grown to be, I say to people, please don't come and work with me if you're looking for innovation. There's nothing innovative going on here. We are the least innovative company in the world. We should always remain that way. We're just doing like the old-fashioned things, the old-fashioned way that maybe right now in this time of a world obsessed with AI and the new fancy thing, maybe that is the most innovative thing to do right now. So it's sort of, to me, a constant reminder of that, just like a forever timeless way of doing something. And maybe like the repetition, the slow drumbeat of just constant hard work, and maybe simple as that.
Yeah, honey is as a luxury in a way.
Yeah, also it's sort of liquid gold from Mother Nature. It really is a luxury if it's done well. I met this guy, and he's interviewed in the book.
Your new book.
My new book, A Guide to Becoming Alive. My new book, there's an interview with Gonzalo, who owns this amazing farm in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula. It is 900 acres of the thickest jungle I have ever seen. Just Disney jungle. Just hours to get to the center. 900 acres he and his wife bought. And you get to the center, and there's a 20-acre flat, naturally cleared section where he's growing endangered or rare vegetables and fruits. And part of what he's doing is bringing back soft-skin fruit and vegetables because as I learned, many of the amazing tastes and flavors that we used to have completely disappeared because those pieces of produce had thin skin and couldn't be shipped. And now that we live in a food system that's broken and upside down and needs everything to be shipped long distances, we're losing all this amazing stuff that had thin skin. Side note, like a big advocate for thin-skinned people as being a thing to live by. Let's lean into being sensitive and bruising easily, but we can talk about that later. But anyway, Gonzalo, I was like, sort of, you're in this like weird Noah's Ark of a place, and I was like, why have you got, hundreds of acres each side of the farm, essentially? And he said, it's because we chose it specifically because it's too far for a bee to fly that may have touched chemicals or pesticides on the other side. So it's sort of this giant barrier to protect the quality of the produce he's growing, which is wild when you think about it, isn't that? Speaking of just like a bee story, like too far for a bee to fly so that he can protect the quality of his produce. Amazing.
Incredible. I didn't imagine that's where that would go. But I mean, in some ways, Flamingo Estate, and we'll definitely talk about what it means for you, but I would say it's almost as much for you as it is for the bees.
What's that?
The estate.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. In the same way, like I'm also sort of trying to stick myself in a jungle far away from everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
At its heart, your new book, and I would say your Flamingo Estate venture as a whole, is about pleasure.
Yep.
Pleasure Seeking 101 is how you aptly describe your book. And the first sentence is, I believe pleasure is a human right.
Mm-hmm.
You go on to note, in a world that profits off of our numbness, it is a radical act to wake up our senses, to champion the slow dive, the deep breath, the be asleep in the mallow, the drizzle of olive oil on a soft-boiled egg. Why is it so essential in your mind to prioritize pleasure?
Well, it's a couple of reasons. We've lost our senses. I think me personally the background, some people know this. I was in New York for almost 20 years. I had run a big business. I was exhausted. I was completely out of alignment. I was so unhealthy. I was so unhappy. I was lonely, actually. And I didn't feel sexy. I was not sexual. Just everything was upside down. I had run myself ragged here. I'd worked in that office every weekend, every night until 10 o'clock, and poured my entire self-esteem into this business, which then kind of crumbled during COVID. And so for me moving there, first and foremost, super selfish. I wanted to wake myself up again. I wanted to get sexy again. And I wanted to just stop sleepwalking through life. For me, that began with a hot shower for an hour. And so it was like really good soap, really good coffee in the morning, just walking around my garden naked and just like shutting the door. COVID was a really good protective bubble. Everything fell apart and I could just stay there in this garden and make stuff and grow stuff and cook stuff. Also had worked in fashion marketing for my whole life. I always thought I was too fat, so I never enjoyed food. Never. And I never would eat anything and not feel guilty about it. So, like real liberation only came to my feet when I told everyone else to fuck off. And I was like, I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to drink as much as I want. I'm going to just enjoy myself. And that was sort of radical for me. It's radical for all of us to sort of have that moment, I guess. I guess the other part about it is that, and I talk about this a bit in the book, it comes up in the interviews. Jane Goodall talks about it. Alice Waters talks about it. Martha Stewart talks about it. That we have lost our senses because our lives are becoming shallow because we're living them through a phone. We're living our whole experience through a small screen. And so we're losing our depth. We're not tasting. We're not touching. We're not deeply inhaling and smelling. We're not fully in our senses. And now I know with my full heart that real luxury, it's just having all your senses at full volume. Eating, smelling, touching. It's joy. That's at the heart of what Flamingo is. An accidental business. I never wanted really to start it. But that idea was at the heart of it, to do that for myself. And very lucky that other people felt the same way.
Yeah, and in a way it was merging subtly, I would say, like so much of what you had done before. Fashion marketing, luxury branding, advertising, but doing it in a way that almost applied that logic to a garden.
No, to farming.
And to a farm.
No one had done that. And it was not, the genesis story, which I can touch on quickly, was during that time when I was taking long hot showers and trying to cook food, we met a farmer who wanted to, first week of COVID, who was trying to sell vegetables because the restaurants had all closed and she was going to lose her farm because she had nowhere to sell them. And I had this agency that was sort of in limbo. We lost all of our clients. The LA team was there. And I said, I also owned a design bookshop in Los Angeles. I used to work the bookshop on the weekends and she'd come in and I said, no, bring your veggies here and we'll sell them. And that was the first Friday of COVID shutdown. And I think she thought, I write this in the book. I think she thought we could sell 12 boxes. We sold 300. And then the next Friday we sold 600. Then we sold 1,200. And then 6 months later we had 50 trucks. And then one farm became 10, became 50, became 128 farms. And just at that point, a few things happened at the same time that we're so lucky for that will never happen again. I realized that everyone was at home. They wanted to Instagram something. Harvey, my partner, designed these boxes that were Instagrammable, big bright patterns on the outside. We sort of applied design language to vegetables that no one had really done that before, but it was really because we wanted, I'd spent years working on Hermes campaigns, stuff like that. We were doing luxury brand work at my old job, and I thought, let's make this beautiful. And really in the early days, didn't really, to be honest, think it was going to be a profitable business. I didn't think it was going to be a long thing. I thought we were just having fun during early COVID. But that part of it, the putting strict design principles on farming, it created something that we could never have imagined. And it really was the combination of those things, I think, and lots of other interesting segues and stuff. And then, the naivety is such a beautiful thing. And we were not talking to anyone. We were not looking over our shoulder. We were just doing stuff. And then there was this really, really wonderful farmer who came to see me who said, I heard you're helping farmers out. And I said, yes. And he said, I think I've got the most beautiful olive farm in America. And it's the perfect acidity and it's the perfect altitude and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I really would love to help you, but we don't need any more olive oil. We already have a farmer we're helping. And as he was leaving, I was like, oh, wait, maybe we can make soap with it or candles or something. So that's sort of how we accidentally got into the beauty industry, which is now 90% of our business. And then farmers would just come and say, hey, I've got 30 acres of sage. What can you make with it? Or I've got 50 acres of lavender. What can you do with it? Or I've got, mountains of sea buckthorn oil or whatever the thing was. And we, I think in the first year, made 150 products, different individual products from just stuff people would tell us they had, which is insanity. Now I know sort of how businesses work. People are like, oh, my MPD roadmap has got 2 new product launches a year, and that's even pushing it. We did 150. And so it was wild and so much fun. I rambled, but then that sort of Muppet show of it all just was wild. And then someone from Australia, from Mecca, which is a big beauty retailer in Australia, the owner came and saw us and said, there's this collision going on between nutrition and the beauty industry and the green world and environmentalism. No one can deliver on that. Nobody. Because they're not making stuff that way. You're harvesting and making stuff directly from farms. No one does that. It's sort of suicide for your margins. No one's been able to figure it out. We think there's something here. Let us help you scale it. So then we started selling in Australia, which really took us from the kids' table to the adults' table. We had to figure out quickly how to make this a more well-oiled machine.
Yeah, it's one thing to make the CSA box sexy.
Totally.
It's another thing to
take it across the world.
Yeah,
totally. To make it a global business and to do it in that time frame as well. It's been a wild adventure, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. You've called Flamingo Estate a kind of far-fetched for the green world and a Red Bull of the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? I mean, luxury fashion and energy drinks aren't typically associated with farming or gardening.
Well, they're 2 different references. I mean, I forgot all about the Farfetch one. Only the Farfetch back in the day was my reference point for let's go find the weird fashion thing from somewhere, right?
Right.
Where the purveyor of the weird purveyor, the place to go if you're looking for that weird thing. So in a way, I thought we were sort of acting that way for farmers. Or you need a weird yakasugi oil from the island off the coast of Japan to make soap. We know where to find it now. Or that Manuka honey I talked about in Australia, that sort of beautiful treasure. The Red Bull thing is more interesting, I think. I get bored, really, really bored with people like, oh, we do a lot of stuff for the environment and try to give as much money back as we can. And people are like, oh, you want to be Patagonia for the bathroom or Patagonia for the kitchen. And it's a really kind of obvious reference. And I was like, no, I don't. I want to be Red Bull for both those places. I want to take something that you have a conceived notion about and I want to reframe it in a different way, which is what Red Bull did. But part of that's because when we talk about the environment or we talk about farming or we talk about sustainability, engagement plummets through the floor. People don't care. People are sick of hearing about it. People are completely greenwashed. And so a bit of this is like, how do we trick people into getting excited about it? And so that's why like the LeBron James of it all and the Kelly Wearstler of it all and the Ai Weiwei and Ed Ruscha of it all those people are, how do we bring culture into horticulture? How do we just make it really cool? And then hopefully people vote with their pockets and they spend and we can give them money back and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit of that. I also think my dream of dreams would be that Flamingo becomes a media company. I feel like there's this in the gardening world, or even in books and in film and in TV, there's like old lady gardening, like old English ladies gardening. And David Attenborough, The World is Falling Apart, and not a lot in between. It gets like cheap and like HGTV, or it gets like, too intellectual. But there are so many stories of co-creation and design, a beautiful design language in nature and beautiful, beautiful creative stories that are amazing that we don't hear about and we don't talk about. So I'd like to sort of be the home for everyone with green thumbs and middle fingers to say, this is a good place to tell a story about that stuff. And so that's part of why we've been making books and doing that sort of stuff.
We have to talk about LA. I mean, you've said, I don't think this brand could have happened anywhere.
Nowhere else.
But Los Angeles.
Nowhere else.
So
I'm so impressed. You really did read the book. I'm so impressed.
Why LA though?
Because we're on the doorstep of Hollywood. I think we were so lucky that in the early days, people in our neighborhood and our network, to be super honest, Instagrammed stuff. And they happened to be the Kris Jenners of it all and the Oprahs of it all and the Ellens of it all and the Chrissy Teigens. And I think that those people who were very, 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 very grateful for their early support were just customers who got gifted stuff from other people. We've never paid anyone. We never will. We don't operate that way. People have been there to support us, which has been great. And I think there was a little bit of that, Hollywood glamour of it all a little bit. I went to this, funny, I haven't told this story before. I took it out of the book, but I went to this investment meeting with this bunch of like finance bros. And this guy walked in. He was kind of awful. And he walked in, he's like, oh, I know you. You created homosexual vegetables. And I was like, what are you fucking talking about? And I think what he meant was like, oh, all of his wife's friends and all of her fancy gay friends liked my oranges. But I took it as a compliment because I was like, oh, okay, that's cool if that's the corner we're in.
Well, I mean, it is radical what you've been able to build in such a short period of time. And I think to that point, it kind of is like, only in LA, right?
Well, also because LA's the Walt Disney and the David Hockney, and everyone comes to LA to be a star. Kind of, there's that. That's in the water there, right?
Yeah.
So,
you even have the Jane Fonda,
the Jane Fonda of it all. Jane's in the book. Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of magic and make believe in Los Angeles, and you get a wide berth for your audacity there. And so when you say, we want to do something like that there, I feel like everyone has each other's back.
Yeah, and it becomes a microcosmic platform for so many other strains of thought. I loved seeing Terry Tempest Williams in your
she's
book.
Amazing. I'm so glad you know who she is.
Yeah.
Amazing woman.
Brilliant thinker and writer on the American West and the environment. And
yeah. Erosion, if anyone hasn't read that book, it moved me so deeply. And her view on the erosion of the American environment under Trump, the first version of Trump, but also the erosion of our moral code. And it's a wildly beautiful book. But she's also been so heavily criticized. And so, she almost went to prison, lost her job, standing up against big oil. I mean, she's incredible.
While we're still talking Flamingo Estate.
I will say about Terry, can I say one thing? In that interview was so hard to transcribe because Terry's a wonderful talker, a big storyteller.
Right. Your conversation with
her.
My
conversation with her in the book. And she talks about just like walking out of her house at night. She lives in the desert in Utah, so she talks about night walking and the smell of the air and seeing the eyes of the animals at night and the sounds that she hears at night. When we talked a minute ago about losing our senses. Her job is to keep her senses on. She's looking at the world and listening and touching it. And maybe she had to get out of a big city to be able to turn that on. But hearing her articulate that, you're like, oh, you are connected to your world in a way that many of us are not. And it's really something beautiful.
I wanted to talk about time related to your products. In the book, you note that you don't make replicas, which is a notion I love. I mean, I think in culture, we've become so used to receiving things in like a continuum. The idea that like every time you go into the grocery store, the blueberries should look the same.
Yeah.
And you note that we make time capsules. Fossilized inside each jar of honey or bottle of olive oil or bar of soap is the record of the place and time it was made. So that bar of soap this year is not going to be the same as the one you might get 6 months or 12 months from now. And this emphasis on making, growing in time and weather, like the weather, I think gets lost so often. People just want to go into the grocery store and find the thing that looks the same as the last time they bought it. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that? And also why the way your approach to it is even more of, I would say, like a luxury. It's this like handcrafted idea.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about it for hours. I have become obsessed with this idea of radical inconsistency, which is what you're talking about, which is a nightmare if you're trying to scale a brand for wholesalers to get excited about it. Where it shows up for me, and the biggest opportunity for all of us is in the beauty space, I think, in the beauty world or the bath and body world. Because you go to wherever you get that stuff that's in your bathroom and it has smelled the same for years. That bottle of Aesop hand soap has smelled the same for 20 years, right? No inconsistency. And somehow we encourage that from the stuff we use every day. But if something's made on a farm or grown from real things, it should be different season to season. The rainfall and the sunlight will completely change the way an essential oil is harvested and smelt. The sage will be different this season than it was last. The essential oil will be similar, but definitely not the same. I get very, very, very excited about that. Why would you want it to be the same?
We enjoy our wine as a vintage, right?
Absolutely. We encourage it from wine. We sort of encourage it in olive oil. So why don't we encourage it in our hand soap? It should always be really good, but it should never be the same. How boring is that? And that said, philosophy started to creep in, not just to products, but to people too. I'm really interested in radical inconsistency in my personal life and with my friends and the way I spend my time and people around me. I really think there's a lot of headwind for all of us just to be the same all the time. And so I want to grow and I want to change. And I want that from our products too. It's been interesting. I think that's one of the things I learned so much that at times I wasn't expecting to. For example, just scaling the brand, just how hard it is to get a wholesaler to get on board about that idea that it's going to be different all the time. Or say like, okay, we're going to have a couple of core things will always be in stock, but then like we're going to lean heavily into seasonal harvests of something. There'll be 100 of them, 100 bars of soap and that's all, or something like that. And lots of different versions of that all the time. It takes a very special kind of operations team. The operations team at Flamingo, they come ready to know that there's going to be 100 different products coming through the pipeline.
Right. Embracing inconsistencies like baked into the business model.
And this is where like the radical awakening came for me. Most of the shit that we buy comes from contract manufacturers. You get it from a bulk house. You don't even know what farm it comes from, let alone what country sometimes it comes from. A good example, we were selling tea from Japan. This other very fancy tea company has another Earl Grey tea. Not only does it not say the farm, it doesn't even say the country that tea is harvested from. I think it's a mixture of tea from India and China. And, I think when we lose sight of where our food, especially our food, is picked from, I would also say the beauty products we use, we start to lose visibility to how those people also should be treated, how they are treating the soil, how they're treating their workers, how they're treating the environment. All that stuff disappears, Part of the new lesson for me, the surprise, was also the downstream effect of all that stuff. There's a great quote. Alice Waters says this in her interview in the book. And she has famously said this for a long time. what you put in your mouth is what you put in the world. And what she meant by that was that the fast food and processed food boom in the 40s and the 50s, it made us digest the values of that food, which is faster, 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 cheaper, 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 and more, more, more. And she says, and I agree, that that way of thinking about our lives is very irresponsible and very, very selfish. And then we trickle down to the bottom of the food chain to the person who's there picking something, they're getting paid not a living wage. The farmers having to use chemicals because they have to cut corners. This idea that food should get cheaper is a lie. Food needs to get more expensive. And in the supermarket pricing of food, which trickles down to commodity ingredients for every other product we use, is making the planet sick, because it means we're using a lot of chemicals to get stuff cheaply, and we're shipping stuff across the world and we shouldn't be, and half the flowers in New York are flown in from South America, and that also shouldn't happen. Like, there's all this other stuff that we don't see that I've become schooled in, actually, and I feel really passionate about it. But as I said in the beginning, like, people would much rather talk about how nice the house is or how pretty the packaging is, so we don't talk about it a lot. We want to trick people into getting responsible in a way. It's a bit of dog whistle marketing.
But I mean, at the same time, it is true. I think what you're saying, what Alice has said, culture at large, so much of it begins in agriculture. And actually, if you go into the etymology of the word, culture started with agriculture. It is a reference to cultivating the soil. And then it took on more spiritual meanings, starting with Cicero and other thinkers. I've totally nerded out on this.
I love this. Where were you a year ago when I was writing this?
I've totally nerded out on this, but I'm very fascinated in this junction between agriculture and culture, the etymology of the word, and also how the very notion of culture actually came out of the land. So I think part of what you're talking about, part of the movement of people listening to this show or buying your product, I think this is part and parcel of a whole community or communities of people that care deeply about this meaning of culture and reshaping ideas of what culture is and should be in our current time, a time of environmental degradation, a time of pesticide farming and all these other things, caring about the senses, back to the senses.
Yeah, because that stuff also smells better and tastes better.
Yeah.
Good food is grown
There's
in good
actually,
soil.
in researching for this, I came across, I don't know if it was an interview or if it's in the book, you talked about this meeting you had with Monsanto.
Oh, wow, a long time ago.
And I was sort of fascinated to learn that you had even had the opportunity to meet with them, and it seemed like you were almost like laughed out of the room.
I was laughed out of the room, yeah.
I mean, maybe just share a little bit about that, because Monsanto, for the uninitiated, is the company probably foremost responsible for our food system as it currently is, which is to say...
And 3/4 of the cancer in the world.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Which is to say a lot of the toxic farming.
Yeah. That meeting happened a long time ago before... I feel like in my old life in New York, 20 years here, I had this wiggly worm inside me trying to get out, just like figuring out how to do something. I come from a farming family. My parents are farmers. I wanted to figure out how to get into that, I couldn't find a way in, and ultimately I did with Flamingo. But a long time before that, I was doing pitch decks on the weekend for like a green brand, an organic brand. It was food, it was something. I was always thinking about it. And I got one together and I had a friend who worked at Monsanto, and I thought, well, they get so much shit. Maybe there's shareholder pressure, maybe there's some kind of like idea internally to try to maybe chart a different course. And so I got the meeting and I presented the document for this new brand. I said they should fund it, I will help them build it, which was a responsible version of what they're doing. I remember it so well. I did the meeting, I walked out, it was a big glass, one of those big glass conference rooms with the glass on all sides. So anyway, they showed me out, and then as I was leaving, I turned over my shoulder and looked back into the room, and they were doubled over in laughter. I remember it so well. And anyway, whatever. I did it in the end.
Hey everyone, taking a quick break here to tell you a little bit about our Season 10 presenting sponsor, L'École School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and Arpels. In addition to its courses, lectures, publications, and other programming, L'Ecole also has a new podcast called Voice of Jewels, which draws on knowledge from its lecturers, researchers, and other experts to uncover the stories and secrets behind history's most fascinating jewels. The first 5 seasons, respectively titled Sentimental Jewels, The Blue Diamond's 1001 Lives, The Gold's Amazing Saga, Iconic Jewels of Comic Books, and The Legend of Pearls, are now available on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Upcoming seasons will explore the themes of talismans and the relationship between jewelry and literature. You can learn more about L'Ecole and Voice of Jewels at www.l'ecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And now, back to the episode. So you note in the book that the book in so many ways is a product of many years of feeling, quote, unalive.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by that phrase. And I assumed you were talking about the 2 decades of running your agency, Chandelier Creative, the one that you founded in 2005. What were you doing during those years that led you to this sort of unalive feeling? Was it just the constant travel, the work stress? What exactly was it?
I think it's a universal thing we've all felt at some point or another. I think everyone listening knows they've been in a job where they feel both at the same time, like in it, like how should I complain? What else? It's a lot of contradictory feelings. It was very exciting in the beginning to build a business. At some point it crossed over, and I don't even know when it was, to really resenting the people I was working for, the brands I was working for, and some of the bigger brands really just starting to resent the stories we were creating, that I was the leading person doing, and building these empty calorie brands, these brands that don't stand for anything, and building brand narratives for them, and them making a lot of money from it. I started to resent them. But also, my mum and dad are farmers. They are of the land. I was earning more money than they had ever seen. How dare I be ungrateful, Richard, you and your little violin? How dare I be annoyed? So there was this contradictory thing of like, I know this doesn't feel right, but how dare, I have a nice place in New York, and how dare I, woe is me, when there's so many people who aren't as fortunate. I think also to sort of maybe mitigate that, I was drinking way too much. I was out. I was always working. Everyone would leave the office and I would just say, drink like a fish. I just adopted a lot of really bad behavior. And it was more just to self-medicate, I think. And then I'd wake up in the morning and do it all again. I just think that was just years of that. I loved meeting the photographers that I'd always dreamed about as a kid. And I loved meeting all the creative people I always wanted to work for. And I loved some of that stuff I just loved. I loved the velocity and the excitement of creating offices and building a business. I loved the challenge of that. I really did. I love being put to work. Put me to work and I'm so happy. Like I'm very, 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 very happy just to like be in the trenches working. And so that part I love, but the rest of it, it didn't feel real. I didn't think I was doing anything real. It all felt fake. The world doesn't need more $10 jeans. And I spent years telling them that they did. And so it was a bit of that, really. I don't want to say it's purpose stuff, because purpose, I write this in the book, purpose is such a scary thing, and it's such a big thing. It's such a word that scared me, and it's like, what's your purpose in life, and the give back, all that stuff. It gets so difficult to navigate. I had met Jane Goodall years ago, and I was like, oh my God, this one's living purpose, right? And I'm selling jeans. So I mean, what's the delta there? It just was too overwhelming. So that I just felt like I was sort of got to a point where I was sort of sleepwalking through life. Yeah.
Well, and now it seems like you've built this 7-acre utopia, which in so many ways you have, but it's not just like a smooth sailing journey building this. And you've noted,
we've run out of money twice. We really haven't figured it all out. It's not been a straight line. No, we've really like stumbled and wobbled through most of it, to be honest.
I read you even had a lawsuit over the use of the word flamingo.
Flamingo's still going on. It's been going on for years. Yeah, we have. And Flamingo's the name of the property. I never thought it was going to be a brand. Had we have known that, I would have called it something more interesting. But The horse is well and truly out the gate now. So we continue to figure out that stuff. Yeah.
And your operation obviously has had to expand massively.
But at the same time, like, I don't want to do the same thing I did again. I really have learned my lesson the first time. I built a big business. I was very proud of it. And it's still, I'm not involved very much, but it's still in business. My first business, it's back on its feet. The team that is running it's doing a great job. I'm not going to do the same thing again. We keep it very, very small. One thing, I have said this before, you probably read it in the book. People would come to us for years when I was running the agency, and they'd have different briefs. They'd always have a different creative challenge. But at the end of the day, I always thought they were asking us the same question, which is help us act small again. We're too big to be vulnerable. We're too big to be funny. We're too big to take a risk. We're too big to try something. Not be small, act small. I think the same thing happens to people as they get richer. I think the same thing happens to people as they get older. I don't want to do that again. So the business has grown, doubled and doubled and doubled, but we are a very small team. I control every little part. It's still my home. We meet in my living room, and I'm going to try to keep us acting very small. I write all the copy. I write all the Instagram posts. I dictate them in the morning in the shower. I love being in it. It's my home. And I think maybe some of what people have felt is the smallness of it. Like, it's a very honest kind of expression of my house, of my kitchen.
And maybe the future is more businesses like that. It seems to me that if there were a fracturing of these larger, big companies, maybe that opens up room for a lot of smaller, more creative companies to exist and fill the space.
Yeah, but I don't think it's about being small. I don't think it's about being large. It's about acting that way. I have said before, this is an example of it in practice. Now that we have investors and blah, 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 and the team, they're like, oh, Richard, you have better things to do than write the Instagram copy. Isn't there something more important you should be working on? But then I was checking into a hotel. I was at a conference a few years ago, and this guy in front of me, who was a big CEO of a big, big, big brand, was there. It was a gaggle of his team around him. Everyone was fussing around him. And this colleague of his came up and was like, oh, I want you to meet Sally. Sally's going to run the social media. And Sally was like fresh out of college and had no experience at the company. You could tell she was so intimidated. And I just wanted to shake him really hard and say, why is the least experienced person in your business in charge of the biggest window inside it? You're the guy that knows every moving part. You should be doing your own social media. We've got it all upside down. I really believe that with my full heart. I think we need to, we need to lead with our heart. Yeah.
So you touched on this, that you grew up on a farm in northern New South Wales in Australia, where you were until 16 or 17. And I guess looking back now, how do you think that experience has shaped you? What sort of things about running or operating a farm did you learn, observe, and do you see yourself?
I think anyone that's the kid of farmers knows how hard that work is, and that it's cause and effect. You get up early, you do the work, you come home tired. It's unforgiving work. My parents really worked hard, and they showed me and my brother the value of that. I think there was, at least for us, an honesty in that, in living that way. We were very much growing food and growing things we wanted. We had such a fun childhood. We didn't have much technology. We were running around the property. We were riding our bikes. We were just out. We were very active. We were not in a city. We had no friends. We were so remote. We never ever had one friend stay over or come over, not in our whole childhoods. And then there were some things like, my mom and dad would come home filthy dirty. My mom would run a hot bath. She throwed like this cheap supermarket soap in the bathtub. For her, that was the ultimate luxury, the only thing she did for herself. And my brother and I, as little boys, I have a twin brother, would sit on the floor of the bathroom and we'd chat to our mum about her day for hours while she took a bath. And sometimes my dad too. And so for us as a family, it wasn't the dining table that was the place we had conversations. It was the bathroom floor. And so still today, that's my greatest joy, is taking a bath. It's the reason I obsess over bars of soap. I obsessed over soap.
Bathing is a great pleasure.
The greatest doctor, taking a hot bath.
Leonard Cohen has an amazing book on this.
Oh, I have to get that book.
Yeah. Leonard Cohen on bathing. Everyone get the book.
Okay. Yeah, so that was one thing, and then that really like sort of pivots directly into what I'm doing now. I think perhaps that.
Well, the first building you built at Flamingo Estate was a bathhouse. Yeah,
because I lived in New York with, when I first got here, 6 roommates or something in a 1-bathroom, a terrible apartment on 28th Street above the Flower Market, and I just remember thinking, when I grow up, I want to have a bathtub. And also, like, I'm tall. It's really hard for me to have a bath that I can fit in. And I was like, one day I'm going to build a bathtub that's so big I can lay down in it. And so I did. And it was the first thing we built. It's beautiful. And it's actually also the reason we kind of started one of the other reasons we started the brand is because I'm sure you read this, for a long time I was very loyal customer to another brand, and I was using a lot of their body wash. The water from the house runs directly into the garden, and my roses were dying. And I loved my roses. I love my garden so much. I was like, it's the body wash. And so that's the first time I looked on the back of a bottle. I was like, what do those words mean? I'd never done it. I'd never cared to do it. And then I thought, well, why would I use it on my roses? Why would I use it on me if I can't use it on my roses? And so before we properly started selling it, we were making our own soap. Just for that reason. And
we only have so much time, so I have to kind of skip over here. But you leave Australia, you go to Europe, you study law in London, you work at Benetton, this amazing company in Italy.
Amazing company at the time. Yeah.
Colors Magazine, epic. And then find your way to New York. And during that New York journey, you write about this a little bit. There's this moment you're sort of finding yourself. You're hiking Everest and you're reading
Jane Goodall's book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What led you to Everest and ultimately to having that book with you?
Do you know, it's funny. You got such good questions. I remember being on a plane and really feeling, just wanting to scream, like, how do I shake myself out of my routine? I was thinking, I'm kind of scared of heights. And I was like, what can I do that is so out of my comfort zone that I might be able to outrun myself? And it was that. And so I literally just Googled, how do you get to Everest? And I figured it out. I got on a group. I trained and trained and trained and trained and trained. I trained and trained and trained. And then as I was leaving, oh my God, everyone thought I was absolutely mad. They couldn't even fathom that I would do it. I couldn't fathom I would do it. We got to, I was leaving and it was someone in my office. It was a wonderful guy. It was like, do you know who Jane Goodall is? And I said, not really. He told me, take this book and read it. And I read it. The trip was horrible. It was awful. As soon as I got there, I knew I'd made a mistake, but I soldiered on. And every night I just couldn't wait to get in my sleeping bag. And I would read Jane's book. And I promised myself of that trip, the trip was quite long. I promised myself when I got back down to Kathmandu, I would call her and I'd work for her. And I was still at the agency at that point. I came back and I said, I want us all to work for her. She'll become a pro bono client. And so we did. I met her. And then she's the one that said at some point, why don't you take all the stuff you've learned over the past 20 years and stop selling people shit they don't need and do something with it? And that was sort of one of the early pushes to start something, to do a brand, was Jane. Yeah, and then but also met these. What's interesting about that trip, and I know we're running out of time, but I had met people on that trip that really moved my head in a way I'd never thought about. I met these 2 people, Jane and Ego, who I mentioned in the travel chapter. We then went on to hike to the South Pole, to the geographic South Pole, across Antarctica and the North Pole. I met these people who live at the edge of the map. Their idea of luxury, all those people I met on those trips, is not going to an Amman hotel. It is going to the edge of the earth and getting adrenaline and feeling close to nature in a way that's not hokey. I treasured those times. And actually, I think the kind of stress of, again, starting a business, I started to feel like I was losing touch of that a little bit. And I just, not long ago, called the whole group back together. And I said, let's go. I need another hit of this. So we went climbing in the Faroe Mountains, the Faroe Islands, rather, up in the Arctic Circle, which was beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You know, those are people that have gone, there's like sheep everywhere, and it's just windswept, and it's this wild, rocky collection of islands in the middle of the sea. It's beautiful. And so it just, I can't lose sight of that. That's my homework, to keep doing that.
So in a way, that experience on Everest, reading Jane's book, ultimately led you in a very roundabout way to Flamingo Estate.
No, it did. And also the thing, I'm my happiest when I'm in a sleeping bag and I've got sometimes I want to go to just get my sleeping bag and sleep down with my goats. And like, there's this misconception that I'm a fussy person.
Yeah.
I live in a house that photographs well. I'm not a fussy person. I don't buy much stuff. I don't have any clothes. I buy furniture because I like design, but I would be as happy sleeping with my goats as I would be, somewhere fancy. I think that's the one thing that I think people are sometimes surprised at. My friends that know me know, like, I really am like quite a basic person, and I just want a hot bath, some good food, and I'm happy. That's all I need. That trip reminded me of how little I needed. All those trips, even hiking across Antarctica, how little I needed just to be completely and perfectly happy and obsessed. In fact, all the stuff that we acquire is more gets in the way of being happy.
Yeah. Well, on that point, actually, and your book delves into this a little bit, is the notion of pruning.
My favorite chapter.
And I think pruning really does serve as a good metaphor for your work. And also, I think what you've done with your life.
Thank you.
You write a bit in the book about bonsai and this visit you made to Rumiko Murata, who along with her son and husband own a bonsai company in a suburb of Tokyo. It's this business that's been in their family since 1929. And I think there's such a power to the longevity of their work, the slowness of it.
Yeah.
What did you learn being with them? And do you see the work you're doing in a sort of similar light? Or and by that I mean just like embracing slowness, time, this value of pruning.
Well, there's two different things. Pruning. Let's talk about pruning first. Prune Your Roses is a great chapter. And anyone that's a gardener knows that you need to get the scissors out to your roses for them to come back really strong. Chop, chop, chop. We need to do the same thing in our lives. We need to cut the stuff that's not working, cut the job, cut the people, cut the partner, cut the stuff, get rid of the stuff that's not working. We all need to have scissors in our back pocket at all times. So that's one thing about pruning. The interesting thing about that trip, though, to the bonsai family was, I don't know whether you remember reading this, you can't pick a bonsai. They will give you the one that they're called to give you, if one even does call them to give you. There's this real upside down, the customer is not right there. Sometimes the customer is not even applicable, which I think is really refreshing. It's from a business, obviously, it's not the same thing for us. We're not in the same way, but there's for them, like a deep respect for just nature in a very tangible way in that business, which I love. Yeah, that was a wonderful trip. And also like that chapter, so we talk more about in that chapter about pruning olives. You need the light to reach the center of the plant for olives to do really well when you cut the olives back. I like that metaphor as well. Like if you're cutting stuff in your own life, you got to get the light to reach the center, which is where all the good stuff is. For me, I keep thinking about that a lot. And
we haven't talked about this so much. You did mention your bookstore that you used to have in LA.
Yeah.
And in addition to food and gardening and farming, you're also this big fan of print.
So much.
Of books and magazines. And I guess in some ways that's what got you here. I know even Madonna's sex book was deeply inspiring to you as a young
or Fabian Baron's work and all the foreign magazines my mum would get when I was a kid on the farm. All the Laura Ashley catalogs, actually for Christmas last year, Harvey, my partner, bought me every single Hermes catalog ever printed. He sat on eBay for a year and wow, what an amazing gift! I do love print. Sorry, I know you're about to ask me a question.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring it up because print has become another sort of luxury in this time of digital frenzy.
Yeah,
and you make a twice a year magazine with Flamingo Estate. Yeah, and before COVID, you did have this bookstore. I know you've done various print campaigns over the years with your agency.
Many.
Yeah, what is it for you about print that sticks?
Well, I think the thing today, if we're going to do it, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And so the print magazines that we do for Flamingo, they're beautiful. It's 100 pages. We labor over them. It's interesting because in the first version of that, I shouldn't say this, but the storytelling of that, we were printing it so far out because to be able to afford to do it, we had to print it earlier. And I would be putting products in that catalog/magazine that we hadn't even figured out how to make. We were just hoping it would fall into place. Or I would say to the team, we've just done a beautiful story on Japanese soaps and it's gone to press. So we're going to have to find a way to make them. And so in some ways, the story, the curiosity around it, the azaleas, the rhododendrons, the whatever plant we were talking about, the story led the product. It wasn't because I spent 20 years someone handing me a pair of jeans and saying, go build a story around it with no context for what the backstory was. So this time I was like, we're going to do the opposite way. We're going to fall in love with the story and then we're going to figure out how to make the product.
It's beautiful.
And so the soap we made with the sea buckthorn oil that the Dalai Lama had blessed from Nepal was one of the best examples of that. We photographed this golden orange soap that came from rhododendrons and from sea buckthorn oil. And at the time, the team was so angry with me because I had no idea how we were going to make it in time. And we did. So yeah, there's something about that there's a joy with that sort of storytelling. Also for me, it's a bit of a push against this incredible frustration that we can't, and even now, even the team's like the first 2.5 seconds of an ad, the time we have to get someone's attention on their phones, it's ridiculous. And even in the last 6 months, I've noticed that the assets exhaust. We'll have an ad asset or a photo in circulation, the growth team will. It is a couple of days and we have to replace it. Not just like, it's going to stay up for 3 months. No, now, but maybe it's 1 month. No, now it's up for a day and we have to replace it. The speed at which things are exhausting themselves is astonishing. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to print something that's large, the magazine's very large, it's oversized, it goes in a hard envelope, it's beautiful, it's sent to people who are customers and, it sits on people's coffee tables and I like it that they read it. I hear a lot about people reading it and we have a chance to just have more time to spend on telling a story. It's beautiful.
Well, I love that story can lead product. That's...
I'm going to get in trouble. That's true. No, but I remember that so many good stories in those early issues that were just ideas we had. Wouldn't it be beautiful if we could do that? And then I'm just a very big believer that if you jump, a net will appear. Mm-hmm. And so I've always we're going to make it. We're going to make the sample. We're going to photograph it. And we have 3 months to figure it out, everyone. Let's do it.
And you're making something that's sexy, which seems both on brand for your brand, but also on brand for the house and the history of the house, which we haven't really touched on. Mm-hmm. We don't have a ton of time to touch on, but I'll briefly say was a porn studio.
A prolific porn studio
from the 50s to the 80s.
Yeah.
Which you inherited in some ways, obviously overhauled the house, but...
Yeah, but the porn's easy to joke about. And when we got there was tons of those films still there and some stuff. It's easy to have fun with. The thing about it, though, is that that house in the 40s and the 50s, from what we now know, was really a hedonistic playground. There was a lot of fucking, but there was also a lot of food and a lot of music and a lot of art, a place for weirdos to come, a place for dreamers to come. The studios used to be in Highland Park, not in Hollywood. Highland Park was the first center of Los Angeles. The first train station was there. That was where people would pull up from the gold rush. So I think I'm over-romanticizing it. People would come up the hill for this hedonistic playground. It really was this very special place. And then the city grew around it and it kind of got dilapidated and it was sort of hidden in plain sight. But in the beginning, that house was a living, breathing thing. So I think I've kept my promise to bring that back in a different way. But it's got a really interesting vibe when you're there. It's not a fancy part of town. It's not in Beverly Hills. It's not in Hollywood. But it's got a very special energy. And I think it's because of all the people that have had fun there.
You describe Flamingo Estate in the book as a hedonistic enclave of sun worship, folk mythologies, and psychedelic remedies.
That's right.
I'd say that's carrying the torch forward.
Yeah.
Well, just to finish, you end your book with a line from a Mary Oliver poem, and I thought we might end our interview there too. Nice. And it's, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't figured out the answer totally, but I know I'm in it. It's the same thing Jane Goodall asked me in the very beginning of the book, which is, can you take everything you've learned and do something with it? I think I have great empathy for people who feel stuck. And I have many friends. I felt that way at some point, many friends. But that tremendous anxiety of feeling stuck in doing something new, or what am I going to do next, or how am I good enough, or how do I compete against that person, or the constant comparison is a thief of joy, and this constant comparison that stops us from doing something. But I believe there's great deep power in just movement. And a baker becomes a baker by baking, a builder becomes a builder by building. It's just doing. The doing is where the power is. And so what's the worst thing that could happen? For me, that's what's the nice way to finish the book. The other quote that's in the book, it's on a lot of our packaging, it's on stuff, is the flower doesn't blossom for the bee, it blossoms and the bee comes. This idea of we can't do it for someone else. We can't do it because of someone else. We can't do it looking at someone else. Just do your thing. And when you do it, the joy will land at your feet. I know that. I know that with my full heart.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Extra thanks to our Season 10 presenting sponsor, L'École, School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and Arpels. A unique place for learning online and offline, L'École welcomes the general public to the world of jewelry through courses, talks, exhibitions, videos, books, and its new Voice of Jewels podcast. You can find out more about L'École at www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Time Sensitive on our website, timesensitive.fm, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To keep up with our latest Time Sensitive episodes and get behind-the-scenes updates, sign up for our newsletter at slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram at slowdown.media. Our theme music was composed by Billy Martin. This episode was produced by Ramon Broza, Emily Jang, Mimi Hannon, Emily McDonald, and Johnny Simon.